What up guys, I was recently going through all of my videos and realized that I hadn't made an updated version of incredible items that everybody needs for 2025. So we're going to go through that in this video. Now, I did say an updated version, which means I actually have done this for 2023 and 2024, but I'm going to do my best to avoid repeating the same things in this one. But I will link both of those in the description because they're both still very relevant. They also will likely have more things in there, as of course I didn't want to repeat the stuff, so in this one it may be a little bit shorter, but still super useful things that are worth getting since making those ones. So with that being said, let's go. So we're going to start off with this one that I mentioned in an actual full video recently, and so we're not going to go too much into depth about it, and that is going to be the Necromancy Rings, the Zorgoth Soul Ring, and the Occultist Ring as well. Now, I specifically made a video just on the Zorgoth Soul Ring, as I recently realized how good this thing actually was, and I enjoyed using it so much, and while it necessarily isn't best in slot everywhere, it does make a massive difference to PVM, and it is best in slot in some places. So for information on the Zorgoth Soul Ring, again, that'll be linked in the description, so go ahead and check that video out, as it does have a lot more information if you are interested. But the quick version of it is the Zorgoth Soul Ring will allow you to have a chance to get extra residual soul stacks whenever you use necromancy abilities. The other one is the Occultist Ring. Now, this necromancy ring is very similar to the Soul Ring, but instead of giving you the residual soul stacks, it'll actually give you a chance at every time you deal damage with a necromancy ability to a target, you will have a chance to get extra necrosis stacks. So of course you can use necrosis to fire off your Fingers of Death, which is of course one of your biggest damaging abilities, and you can also use it for things like the tier 90 weapon spec, the Death Guard spec, which helps give a ton more damage as well. But if you can fire off way more like Finger of Deaths during a Living Death rotation, for example, you can actually get a crap ton more damage. These also offer really good necromancy bonus stats as well, so these are definitely worth getting your hands on, especially if you aren't going to be using a Ring of Death because you're learning a boss, for example, and also for places where you don't have 100% accuracy. These come in absolutely amazing. As the other option is usually the Reaver's Ring, which of course also lowers your accuracy. So if you don't have these two rings, get your hands on them, they're definitely worth it. The next thing that is super useful to have in 2025 is actually the non-grimoire scriptures. Now, in the past, in 2023, 2024, grimoire was just the whole craze for everywhere. Like, if you weren't using grimoire and wasting a crap ton of money, which wasn't a waste because it was, you know, the book to go to. However, it seems like now people are actually leaning towards using other scriptures instead. So the other scriptures that are not the grimoire are definitely still worth getting your hands on. And if you had them in your bank, it is worth shaking off the dust a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong, the grimoire is still probably best in slot in the majority of places, or competing with best in slot, and it is still very, very good. Man, it is so expensive to run, and the other scriptures are just as good in a lot of places. For example, the Scripture of Jazz gets so much use in a lot of places. It really is crazy how little amount I now use my grimoire unless I'm using magic. The Scripture of Full is another one that gets used a lot, which boosts your damage when it procs, and also the new scripture that you get from the Sanctum of Rebirth is also getting a bit of use too. These all have different uses, and I don't necessarily want to go through every single place that you would use all of the books in this video, but if you guys find it useful, or if you really want to know, I could make a separate video talking about where's best to use each sort of pocket slot item, because it can get pretty confusing with how many there are. So let me know if you would like me to actually make that one. But just as a quick example and a comparison, I just insta-bought a grimoire page on the Grand Exchange, and I insta-bought a Scripture of Jazz page on the Grand Exchange as well. As you can see here, the grimoire is 5.1 mil, and the Scripture of Jazz is at 718k to actually buy. Not to mention the base versions of the books as well are also vastly different, so if you only have the money to run a Scripture of Jazz, it really doesn't feel bad anymore. It is definitely a very good option, and if you don't have these, then you should get your hands on them, because like I say, they've become very popular and they are definitely very worth the money. Here's one that's going to break the bank quite a bit, and something that you should definitely try and get your hands on for 2025, and I am working on all of these still myself. Well, it's the Shard of Genesis. The Shard of Genesis is an item that is dropped from the Sanctum of Rebirth. Now, these are super expensive, like I said, and I'm not joking around. These are probably one of the most expensive upgrades that you can get right now. That's because they're sitting at just under, or just around 2 billion GP each, and you are going to need more than one of these per character. You're in fact going to need quite a few of them. Now, there's no set number really, unless you want to get all of them, absolutely, and then you're going to need to have a 6, 12 billion GP at the current prices. But the way it works is when you use these, you get the choice of upgrading a tier 95 weapon set. Now, this doesn't just upgrade your magic weapons, then your melee weapons, and your range weapons. No, that'd be way too simple. This will actually upgrade your two-handed melee or your dual-wield melee, or it will upgrade your two-handed magic weapons or your dual-wield magic weapons. And then you also need one for the Bow of the Last Guardian and for the necromancy weapons as well, knowing that of course there is no dual-wield tier 95 range weapon yet, and there is also no two-handed necromancy weapons in the game. So overall, you'll actually need 6 in total. But of course, depending on which ones you actually want to do, like I have no real interest in upgrading my melee ones at all, and I don't have any range gear either, so I likely won't be going for any of those anytime soon. My goal right now is to upgrade all of my magic ones and probably my necromancy ones eventually as well. So that's still going to set me back a good amount of money. However, the reason I've included this on this list as items that you definitely want to have for 2025 is because now that these are in the game, future content, PVM content that is released is going to be scaled around this. And whenever Jagex drops an upgrade like this, they have to then consider that in any future bosses. So if you are looking at taking on the hard version of a Mascot in the future, you're probably going to want to have these, and you'll probably notice a difference with them and without them. Because of course they can't scale this around probably the majority of players not having this, and then the players that do just absolutely blow up the hard version of the boss. You likely won't need them, of course, but they are going to be probably something that you will notice the difference of. Now, if you're interested, the wiki actually says that these result in an overall damage boost of between 3 and 9%, but that depends on how much the accuracy boost of the actual thing is utilized. So yeah, if you don't have these yet and you are planning on things like taking on a Mascot in hard mode or any other future bosses, it's probably going to be worth getting these, putting them on your list and unlocking them this year. These are definitely at the top of my list. I'm going to need a crap ton of money. I really need to get back on the grind and get these unlocked. Very quick interruption to remind you guys that a lot of you are not actually subbed to the channel, even if you think that you might be. In fact, 60.2% of you guys right now that are watching all the videos are not subscribed. So please do give that button a click. It will help the channel so much. And also another item that you should get your hands on is anything from the merch store. If you want to support the channel that bit extra, please do take a browse through the merch store and see if there's anything nice there that you would like to get and support the channel too. Anyway, let's get back to the video. Now, coming up later this year is a crap ton of content. The roadmap actually shows us a hell of a lot of what's to be expected, and on there is 2 things that I think is definitely going to be worth your time investing into and getting items for. And that is going to be the skilling updates for 110 crafting and 110 thieving. Now, you don't have as much time for 110 crafting because that is actually coming pretty soon, but 110 thieving is coming at the end of the year. Now, you are going to absolutely probably want to get the items for these releases that specifically aid with these skills. For example, you might want the skilling outfits for either both of them, which would be like the artisan's outfit for crafting or the camouflage outfit maybe for thieving, and it could probably be worth unlocking the auras for these as well. If you have some extra loyalty points, getting the auras to help with these skills is only going to help you get from level, I don't know, 99 for example, or wherever you are, up to the 110 that you may want to get depending on what is released with the content. There's many other things that you may want to get as well. For example, you may want to grab yourself a brooch of the gods, which of course will have a chance at saving you materials when doing crafting, but it'll also spawn divine blessings, which give you more invention components as long as you have invention unlocked. And then you may also want to grab yourself something like a scripture of validness, which gives you extra XP whenever you are doing the skilling. There's also many other things that you may want to consider getting as well. This is like relic powers through archaeology. They can make a pretty decent difference depending on what activity you're actually doing. For example, there's the sticky fingers relic, which increases the rate of auto pickpocketing. There's actually lots of things to consider. I'll link in the description though the thieving training and the crafting training wiki pages, so you can take a look through at the things that you may want to actually get unlocked ready for these releases. Next up is actually one that inspired my last video, and that is going to be the fact that a Mascot is actually releasing later this year as well. Now, this is actually bringing in some melee and necromancy tier 95 weapons, and it is bringing in magic armor as well as a reward. So, some items that you may want to get your hands on for the future this year is going to be whatever you plan on getting as an upgrade. Getting it sooner might be better than getting it later. For example, if you really want to be using the magic armor when it releases, because maybe you're a magic one trick like me and you just want to use that, but it's not entirely in the best place right now, so you've been working on ranged or necromancy or something, then now might be the time for you to go ahead and make sure you have your magic weapons, be the tier 95 dual wields and the staff of Armadil, ready and perked out, so that when that drops, if it ends up being like insanely strong and very high in demand, you don't have to pay a premium for those weapons. Getting them now is a very good idea. The same logic applies to the other styles as well. If you're a melee player and all you want to do is just get the new melee weapon and see how it works, if you don't have the melee best in slot gear right now, it could absolutely be worth getting your hands on that before a Mascot drops, because if it does and it is super good, you're going to be paying a fortune for that. The exact same applies for necromancy, of course, as well. We are getting a new necromancy weapon, so maybe get yourself the robes of the necromancer, the Miraciel, and also the offhand lantern. That way, when the new main hand weapon comes out, all you have to do is get that and then not have to pay the increased prices while everybody is testing these items out. You're definitely going to want to have the gear that you plan on using when this comes before it actually gets here. Then we're going to end this with one that has definitely been mentioned before and isn't anything new to the game, but is definitely something to consider, especially following on from our last point of being that a Mascot is releasing later this year. All of the weapons that are coming out with that, well, all of them, both of the weapons that come out with it, and in fact, the fact that there's new armor for magic coming out too is also important. Both of the weapons have special attacks, and they are taking up slots that we already have in the game. Then we also need to keep in mind that the magic armor, whatever effects it has, is likely going to throw a little bit of a switch up in how the magic combat style works. At least I kind of hope so, because it could be super fun. With these in mind, it is probably worth getting together maybe 1 or 2 extra essences of finality so that you are ready to pop anything in here that you may need to do. In fact, I do believe I actually need to get myself an Iban staff for magic. You guys are gonna have to tell me. I heard this was good a while ago, and then apparently it wasn't that good or really worth doing because of the adrenaline cost, but now I keep hearing that again it is actually really good. So for magic users, should I actually be using one of these? But of course, for anything coming out in the future, you may be putting an Omni Guard and an Essence of Finality, for example, seeing as there's a new main hand weapon coming out for necromancy, or maybe you're going to be putting a different tier 95 melee weapon into an Essence of Finality if this new one is going to be best in slot. So while these may not necessarily be needed, it is something that is probably worth having in your bank ready to go, but also I kind of hope they're not needed because of the fact that, man, we have way too many Essence of Finalities that we already bring with us anyway. At least for my sake, I would say so. But anyway, I hope you found this video useful or enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, sub to the channel if you are new, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Catch you later, guys. Bye.